Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Solo ReacTalk. Tonight, I am going to be reacting to World War II and the Egyptian Feminism on the World War II YouTube channel, part of the On the Homefront playlist. If you want to check out my previous reactions to the other videos on the Homefront playlist, remember the playlist card is going to be at the top here. Just click on it and be able to access them. If you want to check out the original video as well as World War II YouTube channel, the links are going to be in the description below. Okay, let's start. 3, 2, 1, go.
On the home fronts in the parts of the world dominated by the British Empire, the war complicates the struggle for emancipation. It finds the colonial population stuck between the Axis and the Allies as they seek for self-determination. For women in Egypt, this is yet another complication in their effort to both make their nation independent and their gender free of suppression. At the center of the struggle stands one woman, Huda Sha'rawi. This is On the Homefront, a sub-series of World War II in real time. I'm Anna Deinhardt. Today's episode is a bit more about politics than usual, but it is politics that is at the center of the Homefront in Egypt. In any case, if you have seen our Between Two Wars episode about the Egyptian revolution against the British colonial rule, you know that Egyptian women fought side by side with their men to win the right to self-rule.
Yeah, but that self-rule wasn't 100%. The British and the French still had major influence on the nation. And the Suez Canal, that very important trade route that, connects Asia to Europe, was still under firm control of the British and the French. So it wasn't 100%, but it was a start. And yeah.
The revolution gives birth to a women's movement led by Huda Sha'rawi, the wife of an important WW2 party member. In her childhood and youth, Sha'rawi suffers under the typical situation of Middle Eastern and North African women of her time. Raised in a sultan's father's harem, she is married off to a much older cousin when she is only 13 years old. But she is also an intellectually driven woman, dedicated to learning and educating herself and her Egyptian sisters. Even before the Egyptian Revolution, Sha'rawi has committed herself to women's emancipation and started a school for more general female education in 1910. Determined to reveal the veiled life of Egyptian women, she seeks every opportunity to speak public by, for instance, literally unveiling herself at a railway station in Cairo in 1923. Now,
that is a big risk, especially in a country that is steeped in its religion and culture and patriarchy.
Sha'rawi believes that as long as men are not free of colonial suppression, women will never become free of gender suppression. So her role in the independence movement is a natural progression. But despite the failure of 1919 revolution, Sha'rawi doesn't give up. She founds the Ladies Central Committee of the Egyptian Nationalist WW2 Party in 1920. Her goal is still Egyptian independence, but also the vote for women. As both these goals remain unfulfilled and she sees that the WW2 Party will not be enough to gain them, she founds the party-independent Egyptian Feminist Union in 1923. The rights they are looking for are pretty basic. Education for girls, raising the legal age of marriage for women, abolishing polygamy, the right to divorce and reform of custody and inheritance law.
Yeah, it's good that she started out her own organization, because as you could see from that WW2 Party, it's full of men, all elderly men. They are steeped in culture and tradition and religion and patriarchy. There's just no way that the goals that she has set here were ever going to come into a party document of implementation as one of the core pillars of their party. There's just no way. So it's good that she's starting out her own union here, this Egyptian Feminist Union, and this will be far better. She'll have far more freedom in how she conducts her activities and how she is going to be able to implement her, her goals in this union, and for it to be pushed to a social, national, and I don't know, do they have provinces in Egypt? I don't know if it's provinces or is it states in Egypt, the different regional zones of governance, but it'll be far better for her feminist union to have an independent say, a independent view compared to all these other parties, and let them push these women emancipation, freedoms forward, instead of going under another party that's filled with men who are not prepared for such things. Yeah, so it's good.
But as the world inches closer and closer to a new world war, Sharawi and the entire majority Arab region is getting pulled in ever closer to the developments within the European powers. It's important to note that all of this is part of the pan-Arabist movement that we described in Between Two Wars. It goes beyond independence for the state of Egypt and towards independence and unity between all Arabic people. This in turn transcends immediate ethnicity and religion, and as we saw in Between Two Wars, has at times even included the Jewish population of the region. However, the constant failure of the colonial powers to keep their promises of self-rule and the rule of the Arabic world by division continues to seed animosity between the Muslim and Jewish population.
The tactic of divide and conquer is, the policy of the day. They don't want these people to unite. They don't want these people to have a pan-Arabian identity and nation that comes out of their unity. They don't want that. They want to keep them divided. They want them to be weak so that they're able to continue their influence in that region. And they'll just make up any excuse to make sure that the status quo continues. And yeah, they just don't want them united.
Especially in British Palestine. There, the economical and social suffering under British dominion is especially hard, especially for the Arab Palestinians.
The main case of the Arabs is against the British government's policy in Palestine. A policy which, if continued, will surely have as a result the replacement of the Arabs by the Jews. Against all principles, the British government imposed the Balfour Declaration, which is abhorred by all Arabs in the Near East, and on favoring the establishment of a national home for Jews, forgot intentionally to safeguard the civil rights of the non-Jewish population.
The situation gets worse when the Nazis rise to power in Germany in 1933 leads to an exodus of German Jews to Palestine. Until 1936, the Jewish population there will grow from 174,000 to 384,000. This happens while the situation of the Palestinian Arabs gets worse for unrelated reasons, fueling animosity between Arab Palestinians and Jewish population. By Sharawi's own account, she is now pulled in three directions. Sympathy for the women in Germany that face a backlash to their rights, sympathy for the oppressed Jews in Europe, and sympathy for the Palestinians as they now feel pushed out by both the British and the immigrating Jewish population. She engages herself for all three causes, with articles in a magazine, L'Egyptian, drawing parallels between the three plights and by actively engaging her feminist networks for the causes of refugees. But she and everyone else is sitting on a powder keg. The region is not immune to the zeitgeist of the 1930s. This includes an influence of European fascism, now seen as a viable alternative to colonialism, by some nationalist organizations like the paramilitary youth movement Misl al-Fatat, Young Egypt. Now, the suppression of the Arabs in Palestine under the supervision of Great Britain makes the Holy Land the perfect platform for Egyptian nationalists to become the defenders of Islamic and Arabic interests. In their self-understanding as Arabian and Egyptian nationalist women, so does the Egyptian Feminist Union. In 1936, violence escalates into the Arabian Revolution against the Jewish immigrants and the British Mandate. and Huda Sharawi's attention is turned once again to Palestine. But with the recent developments, her tone is now significantly more unilateral and anti-Zionist. The Egyptian Feminist Union, in its sincere desire for universal peace, exhorts the British government to live up to its claim of championing the cause of the weak by putting an end to Jewish immigration to Palestine. By doing so, the British government divorces its policy of hesitation and ambiguity, which is still responsible for all the troubles in the Near East. Under increasing pressure to reform, at the end of 1936, the Anglo-Egyptian Treaty is signed and ratified, and Egypt is finally free of colonial rule. Or so it might seem. The treaty is deceptive, with Great Britain maintaining military power in the country, and together with France retaining control of vital economic interests, such as the Suez Canal, the fastest trade route between Asia, the eastern half of Africa, and Europe. Sharawi doesn't support the treaty and calls for a referendum for men and women alike on its ratification. It is to no avail, and it remains in place as a controversial issue in a world which draws ever closer to war. Sharawi and the rest of Egyptians are torn between who to support to avoid being dragged into a war that they see as not being theirs.
But you see now, Sharawi's objectives or missions or goals for women emancipation are really taking a back seat here. The union is no longer just focusing on the emancipation of Egyptian women. Now they have to connect it with what's happening, across or, beyond their borders as Egypt. They have to be looking at things that are happening in Palestine. They have to be looking at things that are happening with Europe, and particularly what the British and the French are doing in terms of this New Deal, where they would have independence, however, economic output would still be largely be held by, Britain and France. These types of things, yes, there are important linkages that need to be focused on as well. However, it is taking up most of her time and her focus in terms of trying to secure emancipation for women in Egypt. And literally it is taking a back seat, and she's being engulfed into these international diplomatic situations.
Great Britain to protect against Italian intervention, or the Italians to protect from British intervention. What follows for the next 3 years is a complex back and forth where two issues remain the same: British dominion and the issue of Palestine. The heavy-handed acts of the British authorities continue, like the arrest and deportation of the Palestinian Arab Higher Committee in 1937. The British policies only reinforces an already growing sentiment that the Muslim world is stuck in a growing conflict over which they have no influence. For instance, in 1938, a committee of Chinese Muslims reached out to Egypt for assistance against Japanese attacks. Despite thousands of miles of separation, they see more likelihood of protection from Egypt than their own countrymen in the Kuomintang in Chinese Communist. Sharawi expressed these feelings of religion-driven solidarity in October 1938 at an international conference on Palestine. We are convinced that any noble-hearted and just person must share the suffering we felt for the martyrdom and the bloodshed of Palestine, and will not hesitate to respond to our appeal by extending their hand to help us in accomplishment of humanitarian duty. She calls out for strong measures against Zionism in order to secure Palestine's safety. With her feminist movement at the forefront, the Egyptian government now stands up against the British colonial power to help the Palestinian Arabs. By the end of 1938, they obtained the release of the deported Palestinian leaders. Neville Chamberlain also proposes a limit of Jewish immigrants to 75,000 for a 5-year period until 1944 in an effort to keep the Arab states on the British side. But this leads to Jewish uprisings and an escalation of terrorist attacks from both Zionist and Arabistic organizations. Just a few months later, the fearfully expected war breaks out and puts the Anglo-Egyptian Treaty to the test. As Great Britain switches to a war economy, the situation in Palestine continues to deteriorate, where the continued Jewish refugee stream from Europe remains an issue. In Egypt, the Palestinian issue again fuels the already aggravated anti-British sentiments, and sympathy for the Axis is on the rise. Egypt declares neutrality, but the government under Prime Minister Ali Maher Pasha, the young King Farouk, himself raised in Italy, start a rapprochement to Italy, who is not yet part of the war. In May 1940, Germany invades the Benelux and France, and it becomes increasingly clear that Italy will enter the war.
And Egypt is going to be in this tussle as well. The British are going to come there with their own interests, and now also the Axis powers are going to come to Egypt with their own interests, and there can be no neutrality now, because these superpowers are going to tussle and pull Egypt from one side to the next. And I guess we'll just have to wait and see, who is Egypt going to side with. Who has more say in the economic output and political, control over the country between the Axis powers and Britain and France.
The probability of war in Africa is now imminent, and Great Britain demands that Maher breaks off diplomatic relations with the Italians, but Maher refuses. On the 10th of June 1940, the British ambassador Sir Miles Lampson receives a telegram sent by the Foreign Secretary Viscount Halifax. "You will, I hope, leave King Farouk under no illusions that he must regard all suggestions of Egyptian neutrality as entirely misleading, inasmuch as we shall certainly have to make Egypt a basis of military operations." The king is left with the following choice by the British: either dismiss Maher and appoint a British-friendly minister that Lampson suggests, or abdicate. Sharari condemns the way that the Egyptian government and the monarch are being bullied by the British. Again, her protests and many others are to no avail. On June 28, 6 days after the fall of France, Farouk dismisses Maher's government. Soon, the war is raging in neighboring Libya and East Africa, and the British continuously increase the pressure on the government to bow to the treaty and foremost the British Empire's will. Any thoughts on gender emancipation or equal rights are being swept away by the tidal wave of war. Now, in 1941, German forces are soon going to be outside of Alexandria, not fighting Egypt, but Great Britain and her allies.
They don't have to fight against them. The issue is, the Egyptian people are going to be caught in the middle of this fight. A war doesn't just necessarily involve or only involve the soldiers who are fighting each other, but it's the civilians and the cities, the towns, the villages that are in the crossfire of all of this. They're going to be affected one way or another. Yeah.
During the fighting there, 650 civilians will be killed by air raids. Overall, more than 300,000 people will have to leave their homes and face the troubles of a country at war. A worsening of living conditions, which drives the population even further into anti-British and anti-colonialist sentiments. The women's movement will continue to stand at the forefront of a patriotic response, doing their best to contribute to the people's and their nation's welfare. However, it will take until 1956, until all their efforts during almost 3 decades are acknowledged. Finally, they will then be granted the vote that the Constitution has promised to be theirs since 1922. And it is that year, 1956, that Egypt, under President Gamal Abdel Nasser, will challenge the British again by seizing control of the Suez Canal. When Great Britain, France and Israel defy the international community to conspire to go to war against Egypt over the canal, this will almost catapult the world into another world war. This is what we are currently covering in our Suez Crisis series. The first episode is here. Our struggle to keep our past alive is made possible by the Time Ghost Army, so become a part of the war effort and sign up on Patreon or timeghost.tv. Make sure to subscribe and ring that bell. And take care.
Okay guys, that is it with, let me just check the title again, World War II and Egyptian Feminism, World War II on the Homefront, made on the World War II YouTube channel. Yes. You know, Huda Sharawi, she had, you know, very good intentions, and, you know, her goals were very, you know, good, especially in terms for the Egyptian women and, you know, their emancipation being at the forefront of her goals, at the forefront of her union, feminist union. And the only problem is that it started in a time of turmoil for Egypt, because Egypt was still contending with their own independence. They were still having to deal with the British and the French and whoever else, and also because of the international chaotic situations that are occurring all over the place. You know, Europe is descending into another world war, and, you know, you have issues in China, you have issues with Palestine, and then you also have your own internal issues as well in your country of Egypt. So really her focus got split into too many camps, and the main driving force for her feminist union was left behind. You know, the goals for emancipation for the women of Egypt, you know, that got taken way back, and now she was focusing on many other things as well, which it's not bad. It's just that it is an unfortunate situation where one of the goals, or what should I say, one of the struggles will have to take a back seat while she focuses on all these other things that are also affecting the globe, and eventually will also affect Egypt. So it, like I said before, it was a good thing that she started this organization. I'm just wondering, you know, what has happened to it now. Is it still in existence in Egypt? You know, or has it now become even more, you know, easier for women to have all of these certain rights and social mobility, economic mobility? You know, do they have all of the things that are required for emancipation for women in Egypt? I think I'll have to just research on that to see, you know, how women fare in Egypt. But, you know, what I know is that, you know, Egypt is also a very religious and, you know, steeped tradition country. So I'm just wondering whether women in that country have also enjoyed the benefits of such economic and social mobility and emancipation. I'm just wondering about that. I'll just have to double check that and research for myself, and then I can just correct my own way of thinking. But yeah, it's good what she tried to do, and hopefully, you know, from her hard work and everyone part of the union's hard work, you know, in contributing to something like this, it has borne fruit, and the society in Egypt has, you know, become better in terms of the equality of both men and women. Yeah. Okay guys, that is it for tonight. Remember, if you want to check out the original video as well as World War II's YouTube channel, the links are in the description below. If you like my reaction, please give me a like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Click on the notification bell if you want to be up to date with my latest videos, and I'll see you guys next week. Okay, bye bye.